Welcome back to Pilgrimage, Manzanar Memory and Meeting. I am Elise, and today's episode is part of a five-part podcast series from the Asian American Christian History Institute, looking at the tradition of pilgrimage to Manzanar through story, theology, and community. This is episode 4 on the Evergreen Baptist Church of Los Angeles' Centennial. EBCLA is marking 100 years of ministry, a story shaped by the Japanese American mass incarceration experience and carried forward through its role in the annual Manzanar pilgrimage. We are recording this conversation on June 11th, 2025, as part of an ongoing effort to document and honor Asian American Christian witness and legacy. Today, I am joined by Reverend Jason Ashimoto, Senior Pastor of Evergreen Baptist Church of Los Angeles. He was a part of the 2025 Manzanar Pilgrimage Planning Team and is a longtime leader in Asian American ministry. Thank you so much for being here. And to begin, could you share a little about yourself and how you initially became involved with the Evergreen community?
I initially got involved in the Evergreen community when I was in high school. That's when I first started coming to this church. Although my family has been coming since after World War II, after Japanese American incarceration, the community resettling in Los Angeles. My family was one of the families that was part of that, a big wave of new congregants that started attending Evergreen after the war. So my grandparents and my mom were involved in the church, and then they kind of stopped going for a while, and then my family started going kind of in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, actually, when my sister and I started attending Evergreen. My parents dropped me off. So that's how I first got involved in the community, was when I was pretty young. But then I was, I felt the call into ministry. And so, after high school and college, I got an internship there and started serving as a pastor at the church.
As you've kind of grown with EBCLA, how do you kind of see this milestone of the Centennial and its meaning to you and to your community?
The Centennial is a big marker in the church's history because as it marks 100 years of the church's existence and life. I just feel like there's so much story to be able to mine from, to talk about, to learn from. What I've noticed is that churches, I'm not, I understand why, because when anyone starts going to a church, you don't often think about what happened in its history. You just think about what's right now. And, pastors and leaders, they sort of consumed by, well, how can I do the best in leading this organization or this faith community right now, and what's going to be the marker of my ministry. As we've turned 100, I feel like it's sort of changed my perspective on what a legacy church has to offer their community, the world around it, and it sort of helped me to think about the richness of what God has done throughout the 100 years, and all the lessons that were learned, and all the people that were part of this community. I don't know, it's made me view myself and my part it's humbling, because it makes me view my part in a very small way. But it also gives me access to 100 years worth of lessons and stories and challenges that the church community can grow from.
That's amazing. And I know that Evergreen's connection to Manzanar has been significant. Could you speak to how the church kind of came to be involved with the annual pilgrimage and what engagement with that has looked like over time?
I guess it all started maybe I guess a little less than 10 years ago. I think in 2017, 2018, I forget exactly when. Before I was a senior pastor here, Evergreen went on a pilgrimage to Manzanar, and we invited some leaders from Fuller. I think the Asian American Center was not yet started or just starting. And it was sort of I don't know, kind of almost like a pre-trip before Fuller started doing a regular pilgrimage to Manzanar. Um, and it was just a really meaningful pilgrimage for the church. And so when the Centennial approached, I felt like, oh, this would be a great time to go back to Manzanar, to take to take our congregation, and recognizing that a lot of because the congregation is historically Japanese American, uh, many of the members and the former members have been incarcerated through at Manzanar, at Poston, Heart Mountain, one of the camps that Japanese Americans were sent to in World War II. And they're all getting older. And so I felt like, okay, this is probably one of the last opportunities that some of these people that are survivors of the camp experience will actually be able to go and be physically just kind of able to walk around. Um, so it felt like it'd be a really meaningful time, not just because of the Centennial, but because this is one of the probably the last trips that a survivor will be able to take before having more and more trouble getting around there. So we decided that it'd be a great way to commemorate the 100 years, is to remember this important chapter of history, to think about how this is relevant to us today, as we see a lot of I don't know, the same mistakes that were made in the 1940s being made again in our nation. Um, and yeah, be able to learn from the resilience of the faith community of an entire faith community that was incarcerated. So that's kind of why we wanted to do this pilgrimage. And then I know that the Asian American Center had, since that 2018 pilgrimage, been doing sort of a semi-regular pilgrimage to Manzanar. And so it was a little selfish on my part. I wanted to do a little less work, um, and lean into some of the great work that Reverend Kevin Doy and Dr. Daniel Lee had done in their previous Manzanar trips. And so I felt like, well, maybe it could help, because they've been contacting me and talking to me about working together in our Centennial, because um, yeah, they just wanted to partner with us through different things. And so I thought this might be a good way to partner, was to see if we can borrow some of their expertise and their the um, the format of how they've planned their pilgrimages, and see if the Asian American Center might want to take a pilgrimage again, but with a 100-year-old historically Japanese American church. And so it was just kind of a nice partnership to be able to do that. Felt like it was great to have new people from the Fuller community join us. I'm glad that our congregation got to hear not just me speak, but Kevin Doy and Daniel Lee, and different people, Tim Sang, to be able to learn from them and their expertise. And so it was really kind of a nice and meaningful trip, because it was sort of the marriage of two really great organizations.
I absolutely love that. And I think, the ability to synergize is so amazing. And, even to bring this, I don't know if you'd call it curriculum or programming, to your church and possibly to other churches in the future, I think is a wonderful opportunity. So I know that you were involved in organizing this year's pilgrimage, which you've talked a little about. Was there anything that stood out to you about this year's gathering in particular, compared to your previous trip? Or any, meaningful moments or things that maybe others may have remarked about to you that stood out?
Well, I think this trip for our community, it was very special because it was the 100th anniversary, the Centennial. So it just felt like this was kind of, I mean, possibly the last big trip that had survivors in it, like I mentioned. And so there was sort of this push of like, hey, we better go because we're actually going with people that were incarcerated here. And I think that made it meaningful. We were there, and it was really neat to see um, uh, people that were incarcerated. Some of the more pleasant memories that they had of like, oh, that's a picture of so and so, and they're sort of recognizing everybody in the pictures. Oh, that's my aunt, that's my husband, and um, a lot of them had invited their family, their adult children or their grandchildren to come too, and so um, I think that was meaningful that we were able to take this trip not only as a church family, but the biological family units were there, and they were having these meaningful experiences of like the grandparents being able to speak, talk to their grandkids at camp, which it's just a priceless moment, and a moment I think where they felt like, nah, they can pass down this really important history to this, you know, um, future generation in their family. And I think the church community as a whole felt like that too, is that they felt like, oh, well, there's, so and so was in camp, or so and so was at Manzanar, and um, there was an interest as they kind of walked around and said, oh, look, there's my name up on that plaque, or that was really meaningful for people. In planning, um, it was uh, really special for me to plan with the team from Fuller because, um, yeah, it was fun to be able to create a meaningful program out of what Fuller had done, and sort of really incorporate kind of the tangible history of the church into the program. For example, the worship service at the end of the trip, we had different speakers sort of come up, different people on the trip participated in the service. We had read a poem that Dr. Kevin Doy had found and curated, and had one of our leaders read. We had a worship time, and then we closed off the entire service with a communion service that used Japanese rice crackers and barley tea, and we were able to wrap it with, like, I don't know if you know the like, put it in like Japanese containers. I mean, I got cheap ones from Daiso, but you're putting Japanese containers and like wrapped it in like the little Japanese furoshiki,
Mm.
and it just felt like, oh, it's really meaningful to be able to infuse our culture into this experience, and then to be able to share it with everybody, because not everyone's Japanese, and um, um, a lot of people from Fuller brought, a lot of diversity, and even our congregation at this point is Pan-Asian American. So it's really special and meaningful to be able to take people to this place and be able to, with Fuller, share the Japanese American experience, Japanese American culture, and to do so kind of wrapped up in or to share our faith wrapped in sort of the Japanese American cultural experience through camp. So that was really meaningful to me. A lot of people had commented that that was really special. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it was fun to be able to create this experience for people and bring people along. I really enjoyed that. Yeah. I feel like I didn't get a chance to walk around camp as much as an organizer this time, but I really enjoyed creating this experience with the leaders at Fuller, for the congregation, and for the students and the staff and faculty at Fuller as well.
It's amazing. I mean, it sounds like the generational impact that this event and pilgrimage is going to have, just how you spoke about the stories that are being passed on within families. I really love that because, like you said, a grandchild will remember that experience with their grandparent forever and pass that on to their own grandchildren. So I think that's so powerful. I wanted to also just speak a little bit about how the Evergreen story and identity has been shaped by this pilgrimage and the involvement with planning it. Do you think that this is something that you want to continue in the future?
I would be happy to think about in the future. Because it's such a big trip, I don't know if we would do it every year. And because, we had such a big push this year. I mean, combined with Fuller and Evergreen, three three large buses, over 160 people. That was a lot. And coordinating that took a lot of work from everybody, our staff, Fuller staff, the AAC staff. And so it was a big venture. I would probably wait a few years before we did it, but definitely be open to doing it again, because I feel like anybody who didn't get to go this time, and we did get those comments from our congregation, like, oh, well, the next time we'll go. And I'm like, well, may have to wait a little while before we do it again. But yeah, I'd definitely be open to doing something like this again, because it was so meaningful. Yeah, kind of how I was alluding to before, like I think the history of the church gives us a lot to learn from. Specifically this camp experience, as we see the current administration invoke the Alien Enemies Act, and you construct detention centers, and with the ICE immigration raids, like come in and take people from their homes, and split families up. I'm recognizing how traumatic it is for immigrant families, non-citizens, and just maybe even non-citizens at this point, that are experiencing this today, because the stories that we had been hearing from our community were very similar. And it wasn't ICE back then, it was the FBI, who, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, they were coming in and they were snatching up community leaders and Buddhist priests and some clergy, I think, from the Japanese American community, because they were suspected of, being, spies for Japan, even though they were just, community leaders, and they had family in Japan that they were still communicating with or something, So, but yeah, some of the stories of the FBI coming into their homes and taking their father away, and that I'm like, oh, these 80, 90-year-old adults now are remembering, they were, in their camp experience, they remember this vividly. Oh, the FBI came, knocked on my door, took my father away, and I'm like, oh, that's what's happening now. And yeah, I think as I think about those events, it dawns on me that there's like, we're reliving history in a way, and yeah, leads me to kind of wonder how we can learn from that generation. Like how did these events impact you? Like, and how can it inspire us to live a faithful life now? How does it move us? How does it um, yeah, provoke us to action, or yeah, whether it be prayer or protests, how does it move this community now? And so I feel like we're really able to lean into that history, and just kind of, ask those questions in community. Just Sunday, I was telling the congregation, I was like, 40 years ago, it would have been us. And then I paused and I said, actually 40 years ago, or not 40 years ago, in 1940, it would have been us. And I was like, actually, in the 1940s, it was us. Like, it was this congregation that was experiencing raids, and detainment and incarceration, So it's been, I think, powerful to be able to reach back into history and to learn from how this community of faith responded and reacted and survived through this experience.
Sure. I am so grateful for the History Institute for this reason of just telling these stories and kind of perpetuating them, because I think that it's important that they get told so that we're able to learn from mistakes that have been made in the past. And like you said, it was in the 40s, it was Japanese Americans that were being targeted. And I think that that also kind of brings to me this Hawaiian word kuleana, but it's like a responsibility that we kind of have to ensure that injustice isn't being perpetrated to others. And you kind of mentioned like the generational learning that is occurring, and I wanted to ask what you kind of hope the next generation takes from this legacy of remembrance and also of enduring faith, and what the future of Evergreen kind of looks like to you when it comes to the next generation.
When I think about the next generation, I mean, I have two young daughters, and we took them on this trip, and my parents went on this trip. My sister and brother-in-law went on this trip, so we were kind of one of those families that, okay, multiple generations were there, and this was their first experience at camp, and it's different than when like I was growing up, maybe when you were growing up, but there's just more books, like even children's books on this part of history. We'll see if that continues to be true, but at least at this point, there are books about this experience now, which is just starkly different from when I was a kid. There weren't a lot of books on the Japanese American experience for kids. So one of my daughters especially has been reading these books and reading about different figures from that period, so Japanese American civil rights leaders and different people. And so she was familiar with this story, and we'd been talking about it a little bit more, which also is different because when I was growing up, my grandparents' generation, they didn't talk about it because very Japanese, I think. One very popular response to the camp experience was the older Nisei and Issei were like, we don't talk about that stuff. So we didn't get a lot of stories about camp because they held all that trauma in. Now, we talk about it a little bit more. So my daughter is reading these books, and she's learning about this experience. There's, she has Japanese American teachers at school, so they're talking about it. My daughter was having nightmares about camp, and which really surprised me because I'm like, oh, she's not reading any traumatic books or anything. It's just children's books about, little cartoon illustrations of the camp barracks and different leaders. She's like, oh, I had a nightmare. And I was like, why? She said, oh, I dreamt about camp. And I was like, about camp? And she goes, yeah, I dreamt that they're going to come and take us away again. I think she had a couple of those nightmares, which really kind of shocked me that she would have that reaction to the story. It kind of hits you of how traumatic this can be if like the next generation is reading about it and they're getting nightmares from what could happen, and she's always asking me like, it's not, they won't do that again, will they, Daddy? And I'm like, oh. 10 years ago, I was been like, no. Now I feel like, I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, I think that really, really pushed me to consider this an important trip for my girls, is that, oh, I want to take them and I want them to see. And so it was a positive experience for that, because number one, I think they went and they saw and they're like, okay, like we're not going to, I think the reality of being there, at least for them, it was like, okay, I get it. It's like, this is like a museum now. They're not going to keep us at camp. And what, my daughters, one was talking to the other, like, don't worry, like if you're scared, they're not gonna keep us there. They're not gonna like imprison us there when we go. So then going was, it was more fun for them because they kind of ran around. They got to see the pictures and like the little kid desks that they'd recreated in the barracks. Um, uh, and I realized most of the kids that went, they were kind of running around and kind of playing, and got to eat snacks together and be with some of their friends. And that's I didn't expect them to like come back and be like, wow, I was really moved by you know being at this Japanese American concentration camp. um I feel like most of them, the best we can hope for is that they came back and they're like, oh, it was kind of fun being with my friends, and like we got to eat some snacks and like run around this dusty place together, ride on a bus for 4 hours. uh, but what I hope it does, I guess, is just that they remember it. So even when they get older and they're old enough to really appreciate what happened a little bit more, they can appreciate that their parents and grandparents and church leaders um, uh, decided that it was important and meaningful enough to plan this trip and take them, even before they're able to register everything, all the emotions and like kind of the gravity of it hits. And I hope that's meaningful to them, that they got to experience the passing on of this story, even if they didn't fully understand it yet, if that makes sense.
That's so good. And I really appreciate you sharing your, story as a father and as someone who's taking, a multi-generational family on the pilgrimage, and how, you all experience that differently, but at the same time together as a family and as a church. I just want to thank you so much for sharing, today, and for sharing your reflections, and as well as for your faithful leadership of Evergreen and of this historical institution. As Evergreen marks a century of ministry in Los Angeles, it's powerful to remember how story and pilgrimage continue to shape identity and community for generations. Is there anything that you want to share as a last word?
Yeah, as I reflect on the whole experience, and talking to Dr. Tim, saying it's really become evident that Asian American Christians have this very rich and important history. And it's not just Evergreen. I learned from Evergreen's experience, but we have so many stories of faith. I think what I really learned from this experience also was how resilient the faith community was through this, and the church that was in camp. And there's so many, I don't know, there's so many heroes and heroines of our faith that are Asian American, that we can learn for, and the history that we can be proud of too, and people that we can be proud of. And it's so encouraging and empowering, I think, for the Asian American Christian community.
Amazing. I'm definitely encouraged by our conversation today. So thank you so much for sharing and for speaking about this important subject. We are grateful to the Asian American Christian History Institute at Fuller Theological Seminary for supporting this podcast series, and to all who make pilgrimages to remember, lament, and live faithfully going forward.